Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's start our Tuesday Uddhava Gita class with the prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhur Swaha, Tatsavitra Varenyam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Diyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. अस्तो वा सद्गम्य तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गम्य मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गम्य ओम सेनावतु सेनाव भुनक्तु सवीर्यं कर्वावै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावै ओम शांति शांति शांति. Let's open our books on page number 202, and this is chapter 6, verse number 19. And this verse goes like this. Evam gadi karam gatir visargoho granoho rasodrik sparshaha shrutischa sankalpaha vigyanam athabhimanaha sutram raja saktam tamo vikaraha. It should be understood that the functions of the working senses, the organ of speech, the hands, the legs, the genital, and the anus, and the functions of the knowledge, acquiring the senses, the nose, tongue, eyes, skin, and ears, along with the functions of the subtle senses of mind, intelligence, consciousness, and false ego, as well as the function of the subtle pradhan, and the interaction of the three modes of material nature, are all my materially manifested form. So who's saying that? Lord Krishna is saying it to Uddhava. So he says to Uddhava, everything visible in this world should be known as external manifestations of myself. See, we are familiar with that term. He says this is my Maya, Mama Maya. The function of the hands is to work, the function of the legs is to move about, the function of the tongue is to vibrate various sounds, the functions of the genitals and anus are to pass urine and stool. These are the activities of the working senses. The function of the nose is to smell, the function of the tongue is to taste, the function of the eyes is to see, the function of the skin is to touch, and the function of the ears is to hear. These are the activities of the knowledge acquiring senses. The function of the mind is to make plans. The function of the intelligence is to put the plans of the mind into practical action. The function of the false ego is to manifest pride, and the function of the material nature is to create transformations of the three modes. The visible material variegatedness is made possible by the transformations of the three modes of material nature. The variegatedness is supported by the functions of the organs of speech, the hands, the legs, the genitals, and the anus, as well as the nose, the tongue, the eyes, the ears, the skin, the mind, the intelligence, the false ego, and the material nature, which is called pradhan, from which the living entities, the senses, and the demigods have been created. The original source of all of this variegatedness is the Supreme Lord. All of these manifestations gradually help one to attain the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, who is the complete spiritual whole and who is the supreme shelter for all. Those who are averse to the service of the Supreme Lord glorify the functions of the mind as a result of being bewildered by false ego, and so cannot understand how everything is an emanation from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, all material objects can be properly utilized in the service of the Supreme Lord. Not understanding the variegated pastimes of the Supreme Spirit whole, people who are absorbed in the impersonal conception of the absolute truth falsely consider eternal devotional service and temporary material enjoyment to be one and the same. So one is temporary, one is permanent. So if we falsely think that this temporariness of this life is permanent, then we are at risk of not attaining the ultimate truth. That's what he's trying to tell us. This Maya is here, but Maya is here for us to use, not to be used by it. So let's look at verse number 20. Ayam hi jivas trivrid abaj yonid avyakt ekoho vyasas adya Vishiltaha Shaktir Bahudev Bhati Bijani Yonim Patipadya Yadvat. Many seeds grow into different kinds of plants when they are placed in an agricultural field. Although they arise from a single source, the soil. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who originally exists in an unmanifested form, who is the source of the three modes of material nature, who is eternal, and who is the source of the universal lotus flower in which the cosmic manifestation takes place, divides his material potency and thus appears to be manifest in innumerable forms, although he is one. Here the Lord wishes to establish that this material world which has emanated from him is non-different from him. The Supreme Lord is the shelter of the three modes of material nature. And he is the original cause of the 14 planetary systems. 14 planetary system means he's talking about those 7 lok above and 7 lok below. Okay. Before the creation, the Lord existed in his original transcendental form. He then manifested himself in the form of the universe, so that the knowledge acquiring senses and working senses were produced from his energy. Okay, so Karam Indriya and the Gyan Indriya. His energy, as were the human beings and demigods. So the word Avyakt indicates the Lord's transcendental form, which exists alone before the material creation. So Avyakt word means unmanifested. Avyakt. The Lord's original form, being spiritual, does not undergo birth, transformation, or death. It is eternal. In the course of time, the Lord's material potencies are divided and manifest as bodies, bodily paraphernalia, sense objects, bodily expansion, false ego, and false proprietorship. Thus, the Lord expands his conscious living potency called Jeev Shakti, which is manifest in innumerable material forms, such as those of men, demigods, animals, and so on. Being bewildered by false ego, non-devotees indulge in material sense gratification and thus fail to understand that the internal potency of the Supreme Lord as the original source of his external potency. Only when due to an inclination for devotional service, one develops a sense of discrimination between matter and spirit, can he understand himself to be an eternal servant of the Lord. The conditioned souls, on the other hand, being in the bodily concept of life, think that material nature has the power to create living entities under the control of time. So verse number 21. Yasmin idam protam ashesham otam pato yatha tantu vitan sansata ya esh sansar taru purana karmatmakaha pushpa phale prasutaha. Just as a cloth is a manifestation of lengthwise and crosswise threads. It's called like a tana bana of the cloth. The universe is expanded on the lengthwise and crosswise potency of the Supreme Personality of God. The conditioned soul has been accepting material bodies since time immemorial. And these bodies are like trees sustaining his material existence. Just as a tree first blossoms and then produces fruit, the tree of material existence, once material body, produces the various results of material existence. So the material universe is an expansion of the illusory potency of the Supreme Lord and is always dependent on him and non-different from him. This simple understanding can relieve the conditioned souls from endless wandering in the unhappy kingdom of Maya. See, conditioned soul means the Jivatma. Okay, conditioned soul. When it's conditioned by the Maya. In this verse, the example is given of a cloth which is made of threads and is therefore non-different from the threads. Similarly, this universe is a manifestation of the potency of the Lord and is therefore not different from him. The example of a tree is also given in this verse. The tree of material existence or the material body produces flowers and fruit in the form of happiness and distress. Okay, see, this is the Veda philosophy. Maya does exist, but Maya cannot exist without the supreme energy. So Dvait means a dual. See, when we read from Yoga Vishishtan, that is some of the Upanishads also Advait. They say the real thing is only the Brahma. But over here, clearly, Lord Krishna says, this Maya does exist. This Maya is my Maya. It cannot exist without me. See, all this manifestation, he says it's mine. But if we forget the Supreme, forget the ultimate, and think that Maya is the only thing, then we get bewildered, we get lost. So this we got to learn from here. Okay? So we don't want to become a Maya Adheen. Okay? Because then we drown in the Maya. But we got to remember that this is Maya. Living in the Maya, we got to attain the oneness with the Maya Adhyaksha, who's the owner of this Maya. Because the real part in us is part of that Adhyaksha. So this, if we remember this and live in this life, then we don't get lost. Okay, this is exactly what he's telling us over here by giving us different examples. See, even this thread word which is saying in our life, what is the Tanavana? What is the cross threads of our existence? All our karma. And when we get detached from the karma phal, we are loosening the Tanavana of these threads. It's almost like, I'm sure you have done some embroidery as a young girl. In India, we used to do that. Just to take some of the threads out and then do the embroidery on that very thin threads with another color of the yarn. So this is what we do with the cross threading of our own karma. If we just keep on pulling them out, keep detaching, what happens? We can really see who we are. Otherwise, this cross threading of it's almost like a network of our karmas. Don't let us see who we are. Okay. So let's look at verse number 22 and 23 together. He has put it over here. द्वे अस्ये बीजे शतमूलस्य त्रिनालः पंचस्कन्धा पंचरस प्रप्रसूति दशेक शाखो द्विसुपर्ण नीडस त्रिवल्कलो द्विफलो अकर्म प्रविष्टः. In 23 is अदन्ति च एकम फलम अस्ये गृधा ग्रामे चरा एकम अरण्यवासा हंसः य एकम बहुरूपम इजैर्माय मयम वेद स वेद वेद्यम. The tree of material existence has two seeds, piety and impiety. The unlimited material desire are its roots. The three modes of material nature are its trunks. The five material elements are its branches. The 11 senses are its sub-branches. And the five sense objects are its juice. Air, bile, and mucus are its three layers of bark. Happiness and distress are its fruit, and the individual soul and the super soul are the two birds that live in this tree. Remember the Upanishad which we did recently, Mundak Upanishad? The same analogy. This tree extends up to the sun. Lusty householders enjoy one of the fruits of this tree, distress, and swan-like sannyasis enjoy the other fruit, happiness. One who, with the help of the worshipable spiritual master, can understand this tree to be a manifestation of the Supreme Lord, actually knows the confidential meaning of the Vedas. Beautiful two verses to sum up a lot of philosophy here. In this verse, the tree of material existence is being described. Piety and impiety are the two seeds of this tree. The unlimited material desires of the living entities are its roots, and the modes of material nature are its trunk. The five material elements are its branches. The five sense objects are its juice. The 11 senses are its sub-branches. And the individual soul and the super soul are two golden birds who reside in a nest in that tree. Air, bile, and mucus are the tree's three layers of the bark, and happiness and distress are its fruit. This tree extended up to the sun. Lusty householders enjoy one of the fruits in the form of distress. For the conditioned souls, both heaven and hell are miserable. The swan-like sannyasis enjoy another fruit of this tree in the form of happiness. Knowledge of the absolute truth is always relishable. One who, with the help of the worshipable spiritual master, understands the various manifestations of the one Supreme Lord, actually realizes the confidential purport of the Vedas. All gross and subtle forms of existence and the tree of material existence itself, which is born from karma, performed since time immemorial, are inseparably connected to each other. Just like the horizontal and vertical threads of a cloth. The Supreme Lord is the origin of the cause of creation in the form of Brahma. See, Brahma is that power of creation of Brahma. Okay, so who created it? God did. So the Supreme Lord is the origin of the cause of creation in the form of Brahma and the effect in the form of the universe. So what we see in the universe, that is the effect of that act. The tree of material existence produces flowers in the form of material happiness and distress, sukh and dukh, and fruits in the form of bondage and liberation. So either we can get more bound by it, or we can move towards liberation. By the influence of karma, Piety and impiety are created. Material desires are the cause of committing pious and sinful activities. The three trunks of this tree are the three modes of material nature. And three modes you're all familiar with, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. The five material elements are its branches. And five material elements are what? The Prithvi, Jal, Agni, Vayu, Akash. Those are the bhuts, the elements. And the 11 senses are its sub-branches. And where did the 11 senses came from? Karmendriya, Gyanendriya, and 1. Together it becomes 11. 5, 5, and 1. Happiness and distress are the fruits of this tree that are tasted by the conditioned souls, the Jivatma. This is a nest in the tree of material existence wherein two birds, the individual soul and the super soul, reside. Air, bile, and mucus are the coverings of bark of this tree. The material universe extends up to the sun. Those who are attracted to sense enjoyments suffer distress under the control of material desires. If we think that our goal is just to fulfill all the material desires, sure, there will be distress. Those in the renounced order of life who are free from all desires for temporary sense gratifications enjoy happiness even in this life. So renounce doesn't mean that we got to become outwardly sannyasi. We can be living in a household, doing our duties, still we can be a sannyasis. The sannyas is with the mind, not with the clothes, or not with the title. When one can see the Supreme Lord as the ultimate cause of everything, then this knowledge is perfect. Okay? So everything is given with the help of the examples so clearly and so beautifully. Last verse of this chapter. Evam guru pasna ek bhaktya vidya kutharen shiten dhira vivrishchache jivashyam apramataha sampadya cha atmanam atha tyaj asram. With a steady intelligence, you should advance to the platform of unalloyed devotional service by faithful worship of the spiritual master. With the sharpened axe of transcendental knowledge, you should cut off the subtle material coverings of the soul. So we are not cutting the soul, we are cutting the coverings on the soul, which is avidya. And the rag, dvesh, abhinivesh, all those coverings. Upon realizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you should then give up the axe of transcendental knowledge. Lord Krishna said to Uddhava, try to understand this tree of material existence and thus make your life successful by the sharp axe of such knowledge. And the same example Lord Krishna gave to Arjuna also in Bhagavad Gita. Sharp axe. You can cut the pieces, your gross and subtle bodies, which are manifestations of the three modes of material nature. And cutting is what? Cutting means detaching, understanding. I'm not the body. I'm not the mind. I'm not the intellect. I'm not the ego. That's cutting. We don't have to cut the limbs. We have to just detach from it. And that is the knowledge. After attaining realization of the Supreme Soul, you can then discard the weapon of transcendental knowledge. So that means just don't get attached to that knowledge either. Whatever I'm speaking is just what I had taught Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. I often give you the example of a ladder. When you need the ladder to climb up to the roof. When you're on the roof, you got to let go of the ladder too. You just don't hold on to the ladder, because goal was to just reach on top. This is what he's talking about. Let go of that knowledge also. You're not forgetting the knowledge, but you have learned how to use it. It's almost like in a kitchen when we are using the knife to cut the vegetables or fruits. What do we do with the knife afterwards? Put it away. We don't just go keep holding the knife. Any tool we use, we learn how to use, then put it aside. So this transcendental knowledge also is the same thing we do. An intelligent person desirous of freedom from material existence should take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and render service to him, considering him to be the topmost devotee of the Supreme Lord. Because all the gurus, they always say that we are the devotees and the servants of God. So when we go and we find a guru like that, sure we got to serve and get the knowledge. While engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord, one should destroy all obstacles with the acts of transcendental knowledge. In this way, one can come to transcend the three modes of material nature. By awakening knowledge of one's relationship with the Supreme Lord, one can become freed from material bondage and attain all auspiciousness by engaging in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord. Next chapter, chapter number 7, the Hans Avatar answers the questions of the sons of Brahma. So there's another story in here. First, there's a summary of this chapter. In this chapter, Lord Shri Krishna explains how the conditioned souls become bound by the three modes of material nature due to being full of desires for sense gratifications. Okay, so the cause for our bondage is the desire for sense gratification. Okay. The means for liberating the conditioned souls is also discussed. In this chapter, the Lord tells how he appeared as Lord Hans before Brahma and his sons, the four Kumars, and spoke to them confidentially. The three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, have no actual relationship with the eternal soul. Okay, so Atma cannot be, we cannot say Atma is a Satvik, Rajasik, or Tamsik. These three qualities are of the Maya, not the Atma or Paramatma. One should free himself from the influence of the lower modes of nature, passion and ignorance. That's Rajasik and Tamsik. By cultivating the mode of goodness. So that's why ever since we were little, we were told, be Satvik, be Satvik. Ultimately, one should transcend the mode of goodness by acting on the platform of pure goodness. The three modes of material nature influence one according to one's association with particular types of scripture, water, places, times, recipients of charity, quality of activities, births, meditations, mantras, rituals, and so on. Being immersed in ignorance, the conditioned soul misidentifies with the material body, so that the mode of passion conquers the mode of goodness. Okay, so it's just like pretty soon the predominant nature becomes Rajasic, thus producing misery. Whenever there's a misery, it's because of the Rajasikta, Tamsikta. Okay, with the Satvikta, there is a more and more happiness. When the mode of passion predominates, the mind becomes filled with insatiable desires for sense gratifications. Those who are tormented by strong urges produced by the mode of passion become slaves of their senses. Slaves means they think they cannot live without it. Although they can understand that this will eventually bring on all kinds of misery, they cannot resist the temptation to gratify their senses. On the other hand, one who is actually intelligent will remain detached from the objects of the senses by taking shelter of pure devotional service. Lord Brahma is referred to as the unborn original person within the universe. He is the secondary creator of the living entities, and he is the ultimate ruler of all the demigods. Demigods are the Devtas. And yet even Brahma is anxious because of his contact with the material nature. See, the effect of the Maya is so strong. Therefore, when he was questioned by his mind-born sons, okay, these were Manasuputra, mind-born sons, headed by Sanak. See, Sanak is the oldest of them. Sanak, Sanandan, Sanatan, you know that. About the means for renouncing all desires for sense gratification, he couldn't conclusively reply. Okay, what they're talking about is Brahma could not satisfy his own sons in their quest. Therefore, for further enlightenment, he took shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that the Lord appeared before him as the swan incarnation, Lord Hansa. Lord Hans then instructed Brahma about the nature of the self, the three states of consciousness: wakefulness, sleep, and deep sleep, Jagrat, Swapan, and Sushupti, and the means for crossing the ocean of material existence. The sages, headed by Sanak, became enlightened by hearing the words of the Lord, and they worshipped him in a mood of unalloyed devotion. So this is the summary of this chapter. So let's start with the verse number 1, which is Lord Krishna's words. Sattvam rajas tama iti guna buddherna cha atmanaha sattven anyatamaho anyat sattvam sattven cha evahi. The Supreme Lord said, the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, pertain to material intelligence and not to the soul. You should subdue the modes of passion and ignorance by the cultivation of the mode of goodness. So that means create more and more sattvikta in your personality. Okay. Thereafter, you should conquer even the mode of the material goodness by the cultivation of the transcendental mode of pure goodness. So you'll be established in that purity where you have risen even beyond the sattvikta. Okay? But we cannot jump from rajsikta to that state. Or we cannot just, definitely not from tamsikta. So we got to raise our level up to the sattvikta, and then with the devotional service, we even cross that. In this chapter, Lord Shri Krishna explains that one should give up attachment to the three modes of material nature, and he also describes the history of the Hans incarnation. In the previous chapter, the Lord concluded that one should destroy the three mode of material existence by utilizing the acts of knowledge. Now, in the next 7 verses, he will explain how one can acquire that knowledge The three material modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are qualities of material intelligence. One must rise above the state of nascence, which is the cause of material bondage. One should conquer the modes of passion and ignorance by cultivating the mode of goodness, and then the mode of goodness can be transcended, stepping onto the platform of pure goodness, which is also called Sattva-vishuddhi. So there's a Sattvikta and the Sattva-vishuddhi. That is a technical term for Atma, Sattva-vishuddhi. The subtle elements, the mind, intelligence, and false ego, are material and under the influence of the three modes of material nature. The spirit soul, on the other hand, is completely aloof from matter. One should regain his original condition of life by curtailing the influence of passion and ignorance, by cultivating the mode of goodness, and then transcend the influence of mixed material goodness by taking shelter of transcendental goodness, Vishuddha Sattva. So it's called Vishuddha Sattva, Sattva Vishuddhi. Okay. So it will be a good idea for us to look at the chart. I'm sure you all have it. The Sattvikta, Rajsikta, Tamsikta, those three columns. So we got to get rid of the Tamsikta, Rajsikta, cultivate more and more Sattvikta. New Year is coming. We can make a resolution, right? To reduce to nothingness about this Tamsikta and Rajsikta in my personality this year. And if you don't have the chart, if you have Urmil's Gita book, which she has written, she has added that chart there. Or you can always go on the website, Ashram's website, and print out the chart. Okay, because we got to know what we are trying to get out of our personality. So just like Sunday we were talking about the confusion or the anger, they are not part of the Sattvic personality. Got to reduce it to zero. That should be our goal now. Okay. Let's do one more verse and we'll stop today's class then. This is verse number 2, chapter number 7. Satvad dharmo bhaved vridhat punso madbhakti lakshana satviko pasyaha satvam tato dharma pravartate. When the conditioned soul becomes firmly situated in the mode of goodness, religious principles characterized by devotional service to me become prominent in his life. One can strengthen the mode of goodness by cultivation of those things that are characterized by goodness. By fixing oneself firmly in the mode of goodness, one can minimize the influence of the modes of passion and ignorance. When one is situated in the mode of goodness, he can easily accept devotional service to the Lord. So when we know what the Sattvic is, the qualities of the Sattvic, we keep on cultivating those. It's almost like in knowing what to eat and what not to eat. We eat well. So the same thing with our life also. What to do, what not to do. What to think, what not to think. Where to go, where not to go. We should be clear about. So he says the devotional service to Lord. We got to look at it any given day. How much devotional service I did to Lord. How many times I remembered God. Did my mind got diverted away because of whatever is happening in my life? So when one is situated in the mode of goodness, he can easily accept devotional service to the Lord. However, without engagement in devotional service, the cultivation of the mode of goodness is practically useless. How can one strengthen his position in the mode of goodness? The answer is that by choosing food, attitudes, work, recreation, etc., strictly in the mode of goodness. So that means the sattvic food, the sattvic attitude. Then we got to know what is a sattvic attitude. Is gossip a sattvic attitude? Putting somebody down, sattvic? Hurting somebody? You got to think about it. Work also, the kind of a work we do, is it sattvic? Recreation, that has to be sattvic too. Strictly in the mode of goodness, one will become firmly situated in that mode. So we got to be firmly situated in the sattvikta before we can transcend the sattvic also. Because we learned that Atma is beyond sattvikta. But that is the step on that ladder. We got to be firmly established before we can bounce off that. The purified mode of goodness is called Vishuddha Sattva, or the transcendental platform on which there is no trace of any other quality. So in pure goodness, knowledge automatically manifests and one can easily understand one's eternal loving relationship with the Lord Krishna. This is the actual meaning and purpose of dharma, or religious principles. Okay, let's stop it here and we'll start with the verse number 3 next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much for joining.